First up on this broadcast, we begin with an important update coming in, this time with how Iran has categorized India. This is a major development with regards to the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran has now opened the route for what it calls friendly nations, including India. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has confirmed that vessels from countries such as India, China, Russia, Iraq and Pakistan will be allowed safe passage through the strategic waterway. Tehran has also reiterated that these nations fall under the friendly category, even as restrictions continue for others amid the ongoing conflict. Now, Iran has been maintaining that the Strait of Hormuz is open for Iran's friends and is only shut for Iran's enemies. But this time it has made it very clear. Iran has categorically spoken about the friendly countries who have a passage. Let me go across to Srinjoy Chaudhary. This time, in the midst of what many are calling a temporary truce, Srinjoy, Iran has made it clear that Strait of Hormuz and the route is open for friendly nations, and it has named India. The Foreign Minister of Iran has confirmed that vessels from India, from China, from Russia, from Iraq and from Pakistan will be allowed a safe passage. What does it say largely about how Indian diplomacy has worked ever since the start of this war?
Very deft diplomacy. About that, there is no doubt. Thing is, it makes things much easier for India, because even today there were about 30 ships and oil tankers that were in the Persian Gulf, and they had to negotiate the Strait of Hormuz. Now what has happened is that as a result, keeping that in mind, the Navy was on standby, and then a task force was readied. This task force had a large number of ships, because it was originally felt that if a whole burst of ships came out, all the Indian ships from Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE and so on, then a larger number would be required. Now, because one or two ships are coming out every day, the Navy has put in 5 or 6 ships on escort duties. But these are large ships, and large ships have this way of looking reassuring. So if you have destroyers like INS Imphal, INS Kolkata, INS Mormugao, they are 6,000–7,000 tons, and they will look large and look reassuring and be helpful for the tankers that are coming through the Strait of Hormuz. So India is ready. If more ships are required, if more warships are required, they are there. But at this point, 1 or 2 ships are coming out every day. So as a result, 5 or 6 warships is all that is necessary. What we now know is about 5 or 6 ships are deployed. They are guided missile destroyers, frigates, so large warships. And this will be helpful for the ships, the tankers and merchant ships that are coming through. So the Navy is there, the Imphal, the Kolkata, the Mormugao, other ships are also there, and more if necessary, to help the oil tankers and the merchantmen. Yes, of course, what Iran has said about India being a friendly country makes things considerably easier for the Indian government.
Right, and this operation is being called Operation Urja Suraksha. Now, what are top government sources telling us? Srinjoy, I want us to break down these details, even more clearly, because government sources are now telling Times Now that a full naval task force was ready to escort these ships coming out of the Strait of Hormuz, but of the roughly 30 tankers and merchant ships to come out, 1 or 2 are clearing the strait after some interval. So about 5 warships that you've been talking about, this is at 5 to 6 warships, that is, they are adequate, and if necessary, more can also be deployed. Guided missile destroyers and frigates are also among these warships that have been deployed. Now, once again, Srinjoy, let's talk to our viewers about Operation Urja Suraksha and the steps that the government has been taking. What more information can you share with us?
Yes. See, the point is, you have to be prepared for all all possibilities. Supposing 10 or 12 or 14 of these tankers had come out, so then one after the other, then, and also this statement from Iran about India being a friendly country had not come, then you would need more warships. You have to be prepared for all possibilities, which is why a large task force was originally planned. Then it was found that, well, you don't need so many. First, India has been called a friendly country. Equally importantly, 1 or 2 ships, as you rightly said, are coming out every day, 1 or 2, at the most 2. So therefore, you don't need a large task force. What you need is about 5 ships and the reassurance of a guided missile destroyer, a frigate. So you have destroyers, you have frigates in the right place at the right time. So you think of a captain of a ship, you think of a captain of a tanker negotiating the Strait of Hormuz, and as he comes out, this Indian tanker, he sees an Indian warship, an Indian destroyer, a huge destroyer, say 7,000 tons, and he feels reassured that, look, the Navy is there. The Navy is helping us if it's necessary.
Right.
So as a result, this has been helpful, and if necessary, supposing more ships, more warships are necessary, surely the Navy would provide more warships, because the initial task force was a particularly large one. But if you need 5 or 6, why have so many ships when only 5 are necessary?
Right. So let me also go across to Rishabh, our colleague who's with us on this broadcast. Rishabh, explain the process to us. As a part of Operation Urja Suraksha, what happens when the Indian Navy or the Indian ship actually moves via the choke point after getting clearance from Iran? How does the Indian Navy take over? Give us more details on the same.
Well, Sagarika, this is an important part of the navigation system that Indian Navy is undertaking. As a senior colleague, Srinjoy was also pointing out that these are big ships, so 6,000 to 7,000 tons is the weight, and it is in a way a security that India is providing to the vessels that are bound to India. There are 20 odd ships which are right now in Persian Gulf and have to cross the Strait of Hormuz. But not only crossing Strait of Hormuz is a problem. Once the Strait of Hormuz is crossed, it is Gulf of Oman and then international waters before it enters the Indian waters. Given the crisis that the world is in, given the way fuel has become such an important thing, the energy has become such an important thing, suddenly there is a crisis. There could be a possible piracy also in international waters, and to avoid all that, this whole operation has been launched, Operation Urja Suraksha. As the name say it is for the security of the energy vessels that would come to India. LPG, LNG, and crude oil. These are the major exports that India wants from the Gulf countries. And once they cross Strait of Hormuz and are in international water, Indian Navy will escort them to the safe Indian waters and then to the designated port as well. INS Imphal, INS Kolkata, these are big ships of Indian Navy, which the sources suggest have been deployed under Operation Urja Suraksha. There have been talks that have been going on that what will Indian Navy's role would be. Remember, earlier this week, we had seen Raksha Mantri holding a high-level meeting where the 3 service chiefs, CDS, and other members of the Ministry of Defense were present. Maritime security was something that was discussed there. And after that, this Operation Urja Suraksha has been launched. The reason for this is that India fears that once it's out of Iranian water and it is the civilian ship or the merchant ship are in international waters, given the crisis of energy right now worldwide, there could be piracy attempt on these vessels, and that's the reason that Indian Navy has been put in place to ensure that after safe passage from the Strait of Hormuz, a safe passage is provided to them to the ports of India.
Yes, so let's also break down more details of how Operation Urja Suraksha is currently, in action. Srinjoy, we are speaking about what exactly happens when a cargo or an Indian vessel moves via the choke point after getting clearance from Iran. And what is the larger message that the government and the Indian Navy is also sending out by undertaking this kind of a mission?
Well, first of all, India has to look after its people. India has to look after its sailors. India has to look after its ships. Now you have 20, 30 ships in Bahrain, in Qatar, in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in the Persian Gulf. And they have to get through. Now the only way these ships can come through is through the Strait of Hormuz. Now if the Strait of Hormuz is mined, or there are guns there firing at these ships, then naturally the strait is closed. But in this case, the Iranians have said that India is a friendly country.
Yes.
Indian ships can go through, which is reassuring, very reassuring. India, Russia, China, Iran's friends. Now India then has a safe passage through the Straits of Hormuz. Then it gets into, the ships go into the Gulf of Oman, then the Arabian Sea, then Indian waters.
Right.
Now the question is that anything can happen. There can be any issue during such a critical time. So you need ships. Now warships. Now initially it was felt that maybe all these ships would come out together in one burst, 10 or 12 or 14. Then it has been found that the ships that are coming out are like 1 or 2 a day. Now, initially, as I said, it was thought maybe 10 or 12.
Right.
So you had a large task force.
Yes.
A very large task force. But why have a large task force when only 1 or 2 ships are coming out every day,
right,
or 1 or 2 at a time? So therefore, it has been that large task force has been pared down to 5 or 6.
Right.
But these are big ships. These are serious warships.
Yes.
A guided missile destroyer like the INS Imphal, the INS Kolkata, the INS Marmugao. So these are serious ships.
Yes.
Now, as I was mentioning to you, here is a tanker which has some negotiated the Hormuz Strait.
Stay with us, Srinjoy. I will talk more about Operation Urja Suraksha, because the Navy is also in constant touch with Indian-bound cargo ships preparing to leave the Persian Gulf. And once the vessel exits the choke point, with the approval of Iran, the Indian Navy destroyers and frigates then take over. Now, that's the latest information we are tracking, but there's more